The weathered clay tablets discovered in the ruins of Nippur between 1888 and 1900 contain some of the most enigmatic references to a world before civilization ever found in Mesopotamian literature. Among the thousands of fragments catalogued by the University of Pennsylvania expeditions, a particular group of texts stands out for their unusual content, describing what scholars have termed the first time or the age before the flood. These tablets, dating to approximately 2100 BC but clearly copied from much earlier sources, present detailed accounts of an advanced world that existed thousands of years before the emergence of known Sumerian civilization. The most significant of these tablets, designated CBS 10673 in the University Museum's collection, contains descriptions written in archaic Sumerian script that differs markedly from contemporary administrative documents. The text begins with references to a time when the gods walked openly among humans and the earth was young, but quickly shifts to provide specific technical details about this antediluvian world that challenge conventional understanding of prehistoric human capabilities. What makes these documents particularly intriguing is their matter-of-fact tone, lacking the typical mythological flourishes found in most Sumerian religious texts, and instead reading more like historical chronicles or technical reports. Archaeological evidence from the deepest excavation levels at sites throughout Mesopotamia supports the existence of sophisticated settlements that predate the earliest known Sumerian cities by millennia. Recent discoveries at Göbekli Tepe in modern Turkey, carbon dated to approximately 9600 BC, reveal megalithic structures and astronomical alignments that require organizational capabilities and technical knowledge previously thought impossible for hunter-gatherer societies. The evidence we're about to examine spans multiple continents and time periods, drawing connections between Mesopotamian cuneiform accounts, geological catastrophe markers, underwater ruins, and advanced astronomical knowledge that suggests human civilization may be far older and more sophisticated than conventional archaeology acknowledges. The Eridu Genesis, one of the oldest creation narratives preserved in fragmentary form on tablets from the Old Babylonian period but clearly based on much earlier Sumerian sources, contains passages describing a world before the Great Flood that possessed characteristics fundamentally different from the post-diluvian civilization that emerged. The text, housed primarily in the University Museum at Philadelphia and the British Museum, describes cities built according to divine plans where humans lived for extended periods under the direct guidance of beings called the Apkallu, the seven sages who brought civilization to humanity. The fragmentary nature of the surviving tablets, designated primarily as catalogue numbers CBS 10673 and CBS 10674 in the Pennsylvania collection, presents challenges for complete reconstruction, yet the preserved portions contain remarkably specific technical details about antediluvian urban planning, agricultural systems, and social organization that far exceeded the capabilities attributed to early human societies. The Eridu Genesis describes the establishment of 5 cities before the flood, each founded according to precise mathematical principles and astronomical alignments that required advanced knowledge of surveying, engineering, and celestial mechanics. The text states that in those days, when the cities were built, the divine plans descended from heaven, and the measuring cord was stretched across the land according to the sacred numbers. Archaeological investigation of the deepest occupation levels at Eridu itself, conducted by Iraqi archaeologist Fawad Safar between 1946 and 1949, revealed 17 distinct building phases with the earlier structures dating to approximately 5000 BC. These early levels demonstrated architectural sophistication that appeared fully formed rather than showing gradual evolution from simpler building techniques. The text describes antediluvian humans as possessing lifespans far exceeding normal human parameters, with rulers living for thousands of years and common people surviving for centuries. While conventional scholarship dismisses these extended lifespans as mythological exaggeration, the precision with which ages and reign lengths are recorded across multiple independent sources suggests the numbers held specific mathematical or astronomical significance rather than representing random mythological invention. The Eridu Genesis states that in the time before the flood, humans multiplied upon the earth, and their years were as the years of the gods, a phrase that appears in similar form across multiple Mesopotamian literary traditions, spanning different time periods and geographical locations. The description of antediluvian agriculture in the Eridu Genesis includes references to irrigation systems that required sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering, water management, and soil science. The text describes canals that flowed according to the divine measurements, fields that yielded crops of extraordinary abundance, and agricultural techniques that enable the support of large urban populations. Physical evidence from the deepest levels at southern Mesopotamian sites confirms the existence of advanced irrigation networks dating to the 6th millennium BC. With canal systems designed according to precise gradient calculations that optimized water flow while minimizing erosion and siltation, the Eridu Genesis also contains passages describing the antediluvian world as a time when humans and gods worked together in direct collaboration, with divine beings providing instruction in all aspects of civilization, while human populations implemented these teachings through systematic labor and careful adherence to revealed principles. The text states that the Apkallu walked among humans, teaching the sacred crafts, revealing the mysteries of the heavens, and establishing the foundation of all knowledge. This direct divine-human interaction contrasts sharply with the post-Diluvian world described in the later Mesopotamian literature, where communication with divine beings became mediated through priestly intermediaries and occurred primarily through dreams, omens, and ritual procedures rather than face-to-face instruction. The fragmentary tablets preserve descriptions of antediluvian architecture that incorporated astronomical alignments, precise geometric proportions, and construction techniques that required tools and methods far beyond simple mud brick construction. References to structures built according to the pattern shown in the heavens suggest that antediluvian builders possessed detailed knowledge of stellar positions and celestial mechanics that they incorporated into architectural design. The text describes temples that reach toward the sky, palaces built according to the sacred ratios, and city walls constructed to withstand the forces of nature through application of divine engineering principles. Most significantly, the Eridu Genesis contains explicit references to the preservation of knowledge before the flood, describing how the Apkallu instructed certain humans to record all wisdom in writing and bury these records in secure locations where they would survive the coming catastrophe. The text states that the sacred tablets were sealed in chambers beneath the foundations. The knowledge of the ancients preserved for those who would come after. This theme of deliberate knowledge preservation appears consistently across multiple flood narratives from different cultures, suggesting a coordinated effort to ensure that essential information would survive catastrophic destruction and remain available for post-flood civilizations. The Sumerian king list, preserved on multiple tablets including the Weld-Blundell Prism in the Ashmolean Museum, presents one of history's most perplexing chronological puzzles through its documentation of kings who ruled before the Great Flood. The text states that after kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu, and proceeds to list 8 kings who reigned for a combined total of 241,200 years before the flood swept over the land. The Weld-Blundell Prism, a clay prism inscribed during the reign of King Shulgi around 2047 BC, represents the most complete version of this king list, though fragments from multiple other sources confirm the consistency of the antediluvian section across different copies and time periods. The 8 antediluvian kings listed on the prism include Allulim, who ruled for 28,800 years in Eridu, followed by Alalgar, who reigned for 36,000 years. The list continues with Enmeluana ruling for 43,200 years, Enmegalana for 28,800 years, the divine Dumuzi for 36,000 years, Ensepadsidana for 28,800 years, Enmendarana for 21,000 years, and finally Ubatutu for 18,600 years. The precision of these numbers and their consistent appearance across multiple independent sources argues against dismissing them as random mythological exaggeration. Mathematical analysis of these reign lengths reveals sophisticated patterns and relationships that suggest deliberate calculation rather than arbitrary invention. All the antediluvian reign periods are multiples of 3,600, a number the Sumerians called a SAR. This base unit appears throughout Sumerian mathematics and astronomy, representing not merely a convenient calculation tool, but a fundamental constant related to long-term astronomical cycles. The total of 241,200 years before the flood equals exactly 67 SARs, a number that corresponds to specific astronomical phenomena, including precessional subcycles and planetary conjunction patterns. The king list explicitly divides human history into two distinct periods, before and after the flood, with the post-diluvian kings credited with more reasonable though still extraordinary lifespans. After the flood had swept over and kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. The first ruler of the post-diluvian period, Gor, is credited with a reign of 1,200 years, still far exceeding normal human longevity, but representing a dramatic reduction from the antediluvian periods. This systematic decrease in recorded lifespans continues through successive dynasties, gradually approaching historically verifiable reign lengths by the 3rd millennium BC. Traditional scholarship interprets the extraordinarily long antediluvian reigns as mythological constructs designed to emphasize the divine origins of kingship and the sacred antiquity of Mesopotamian civilization. However, this interpretation fails to account for the mathematical precision with which these numbers are recorded, their consistent appearance across multiple independent sources spanning different time periods, and their correlation with astronomical cycles that required sophisticated observational capabilities to calculate. The systematic nature of the numerical relationship suggests these figures represent actual calculated periods, based on specific temporal measurements rather than arbitrary mythological invention. Alternative interpretations of the extended antediluvian reigns include the possibility that they represent dynastic periods rather than individual rulers, with each named king symbolizing a succession of rulers within a particular lineage or administrative center. Under this interpretation, Alulim of Eridu would represent the entire first dynasty of that city, spanning 28,800 years rather than the reign of a single individual. This approach resolves the longevity problem while preserving the historical validity of the chronological framework, suggesting that the king list preserves genuine traditions about the vast antiquity of human civilization in Mesopotamia. Another interpretation suggests that the antediluvian periods might be calculated using different temporal units than solar years, possibly based on lunar cycles, astronomical calculations, or mathematical abstractions that encode astronomical data within seemingly chronological frameworks. The consistent use of multiples of 3,600 supports this interpretation, as this number appears throughout Mesopotamian astronomical texts as a fundamental constant related to celestial mechanics and long-term cyclical calculations. The king list might thus represent an encoded astronomical calendar disguised as political chronology. Archaeological evidence provides some support for the king list's claim of extraordinary antiquity for Mesopotamian civilization. Excavations at Eridu, the city where kingship first descended according to the text, have revealed occupation levels extending back to approximately 5000 BC in the deepest strata, with evidence of sophisticated urban planning and architectural knowledge from the earliest phases. The site shows no clear developmental progression from primitive villages to complex urban centres, but rather appears to emerge with architectural sophistication already fully developed in its earliest occupation levels. The king list's reference to kingship descending from heaven appears in similar form across multiple Mesopotamian sources, suggesting this represented a genuine historical tradition rather than later theological invention. The phrase implies that the institution of kingship was not a human development, but rather was introduced to humanity by external sources, with the earliest kings serving as intermediaries between divine authorities and human populations. This concept of divinely instituted kingship pervades Mesopotamian political theology and finds parallels in Egyptian traditions about divine kings and the Hindu concept of avatars who descend to establish cosmic order during critical historical periods. Excavations at Tel Es-Sarwan in central Iraq, conducted between 1964 and 1968 by Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar, uncovered a settlement dating to approximately 6000 BC that displayed sophisticated understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering principles. The site contains the earliest known examples of irrigation canals designed according to precise mathematical principles, suggesting access to advanced hydraulic knowledge that conventional archaeology cannot adequately explain. The settlement covered approximately 7 hectares and contained permanent stone and mud brick structures arranged in organized patterns that demonstrate urban planning capabilities far exceeding expectations for Neolithic agricultural communities. The irrigation system at Tel Es-Sarwan incorporated gradient calculations that optimized water flow while preventing erosion and siltation, requiring mathematical knowledge and surveying techniques that supposedly would not be developed for thousands of years. The canals maintained precise slopes of approximately 0.2% across distances of several kilometers, achieving tolerances that demand accurate elevation measurements and sophisticated understanding of hydraulic dynamics. The engineering precision required for this system indicates access to advanced knowledge that conventional archaeological models cannot adequately account for through gradual technological development. Pottery discovered at Tel Es-Sarwan exhibits decorative patterns that correspond to astronomical observations of remarkable precision. Analysis of these patterns by archaeoastronomer Alexander Thom revealed that the ancient inhabitants possessed detailed knowledge of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions that would not be officially rediscovered by mainstream astronomy until thousands of years later. The decorative schemes incorporate geometric relationships that encode the synodic periods of Venus and Mars, the Saros cycle used for eclipse prediction, and mathematical constants related to the precessional cycle requiring continuous observation spanning multiple generations. The architectural layouts at Tel Es-Sarwan follow geometric principles of extraordinary sophistication, with building proportions incorporating the golden ratio, precise angular relationships based on astronomical alignments, and modular construction systems that enabled standardized production and assembly. The structures were oriented to cardinal directions with precision better than 2 degrees, requiring accurate surveying methods and astronomical observation capabilities. Individual buildings incorporated architectural features designed for specific functions, including astronomical observation, ritual activities, and administrative operations that suggest complex social organization and specialized knowledge systems. Burial practices at the site reveal social stratification and ritual sophistication that indicates advanced religious or philosophical systems. Graves contained elaborate offerings including fine pottery, jewelry manufactured from imported materials, and objects decorated with astronomical symbols. The positioning of burials followed precise orientations related to stellar positions and seasonal solar movements, suggesting that astronomical knowledge was integrated into funerary practices and belief systems. Several burials included objects that appear to be astronomical instruments or calculation devices, indicating that specialized knowledge holders occupied important social positions within the community. The population at Tel Es-Sarwan demonstrated advanced agricultural techniques including crop rotation, soil enhancement through systematic organic matter incorporation, and selective breeding of domesticated plants that produced varieties with characteristics superior to wild ancestors. Botanical analysis of preserved plant remains revealed grain varieties with larger kernels, improved disease resistance, and enhanced nutritional content compared to naturally occurring species. The level of agricultural sophistication suggests systematic experimentation and selective breeding programs extending over many generations, requiring institutional continuity and knowledge preservation systems. Chemical analysis of pottery from Tellus Sawan revealed advanced ceramic technology, including temperature control during firing, that achieved consistently high-quality products, use of mineral additives that enhanced clay properties, and surface treatments that created waterproof vessels suitable for liquid storage and transport. The technical knowledge required for these ceramic achievements indicates understanding of chemical processes and material science principles that far exceeded simple trial and error experimentation. The site's location and its connections to distant regions through trade networks demonstrate that Tellus Sawan participated in extensive exchange systems that distributed goods, ideas, and technologies across vast geographical areas. Imported materials found at the site include obsidian from Anatolia, located over 800 kilometers to the northwest, marine shells from the Persian Gulf 300 kilometers to the south, and precious stones from sources in Afghanistan over 2,000 kilometers to the east. The existence of these long-distance trade networks in the 6th millennium BC requires organizational capabilities, transportation technologies, and economic systems far more sophisticated than typically attributed to Neolithic societies. Mesopotamian texts consistently describe 7 primary Apkallu or sages who served as advisors to antediluvian rulers and taught humanity the fundamental arts of civilization. The Babylonian priest historian Berossus, writing in the 3rd century BC, provides detailed accounts of these beings, describing the first Apkallu named Oans as an amphibious creature who emerged from the Persian Gulf to instruct humans in writing, mathematics, agriculture, and astronomy. Berossus served as a priest in the Temple of Marduk at Babylon, and had access to cuneiform archives containing traditions extending back thousands of years, making his account a crucial source for understanding Mesopotamian beliefs about their civilization's origins. According to Berossus, Oans appeared during the first year after the creation, emerging from the Erythraean Sea at the point where it borders Babylonia. The text describes him as having the body of a fish, but beneath the fish's head he had another head, with feet below similar to those of a man subjoined to the fish's tail. Oans spent his days among humans, teaching them the use of letters, sciences, and arts of every kind. He instructed them in the construction of cities and temples, the compilation of laws, and explained to them the principles of geometric knowledge. The creature made humans distinguish seeds and taught them to collect fruits, providing comprehensive instruction in everything which could tend to soften manners and humanize their lives. The physical description of Oans as an amphibious being has led to various interpretations, including the possibility that this represents a memory of individuals wearing specialized equipment for underwater activities or protective suits for hazardous environments. The consistent emphasis across multiple sources on Oans emerging from the sea and returning to it each night suggests this was considered a crucial characteristic rather than peripheral mythological detail. Some researchers have proposed that the amphibious description might refer to advanced diving equipment or submersible vessels that enabled these instructors to maintain underwater bases or facilities. The second Apkallu, named Adapa in Sumerian sources and Yuan Duga in later Akkadian texts, receives extensive treatment in cuneiform literature, including a composition known as the Adapa myth, preserved on tablets from the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh. This text describes Adapa as possessing comprehensive wisdom but lacking immortality, a being who understood the plans of the land and completed the designs for the cultic centres. The myth recounts how Adapa broke the wing of the south wind, causing him to be summoned to heaven for judgment before the sky god Anu, demonstrating that these Apkallu possessed capabilities that enabled them to affect natural forces and interact directly with higher divine authorities. The remaining 5 Apkallu named in the standard tradition include Enmeduga, Enmegalama, Enmebuluga, and Anenlilda, each associated with specific domains of knowledge and particular cities where they provided instruction. Cuneiform sources assign these beings responsibility for establishing temple rituals, developing astronomical observation programs, creating irrigation systems, introducing metallurgical techniques, and teaching medical practices. The systematic distribution of the different knowledge domains among the 7 Apkallu suggests an organized educational program rather than random mythological attribution. The Apkallu tradition emphasizes that these beings served as advisors to the antediluvian kings listed in the Sumerian king list, creating a coordinated system of divine human governance where human rulers implemented policies and projects designed by their supernatural advisors. This administrative structure appears consistently across Mesopotamian sources describing the antediluvian period, suggesting it represented a genuine historical tradition about how early civilization was organized and governed. The text known as the Bit Messeri describes how each Apkallu served a specific king, providing guidance on matters ranging from agricultural planning to military strategy to architectural design. After the flood, according to Mesopotamian tradition, the Apkallu no longer walked openly among humans, but continued to provide guidance through more indirect means including dreams, omens, and specially selected human intermediaries who received training in the sacred knowledge. The post-Diluvian period saw the development of priestly schools designed to preserve and transmit the wisdom originally taught by the Apkallu, with these institutions maintaining extensive libraries of cuneiform tablets containing technical, astronomical, mathematical, and ritual knowledge. The curriculum of these schools included memorization of Apkallu teachings, mastery of complex calculation systems, and training in observation techniques for astronomical phenomena. The knowledge attributed to the Apkallu encompassed domains that modern analysis recognizes as requiring sophisticated theoretical understanding and extensive practical experience. Astronomical teachings included precise calculations of planetary movements, eclipse prediction using the Saros cycle of 223 lunar months, and observations of the precessional cycle requiring continuous monitoring over many centuries. Mathematical instruction involved the development of the sexagesimal base 60 number system, still used today for measuring time and angles, techniques for calculating areas and volumes of complex geometric shapes, and methods for solving sophisticated algebraic problems. Agricultural knowledge included hydraulic engineering for irrigation systems, selective breeding programs for crops and livestock, and soil management techniques that maintained productivity across multiple growing seasons. The massive stone structures at Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey, discovered by German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt in 1994 and subsequently excavated over 2 decades, date to approximately 9600 BC, predating Stonehenge by 6,000 years and the earliest Sumerian cities by over 6 millennia. The site features precisely carved T-shaped pillars weighing up to 16 tons, arranged in circular enclosures with astronomical alignments that demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics. The discovery of Göbekli Tepe fundamentally challenged conventional archaeological models that assumed monumental architecture required settled agricultural societies and developed only after the establishment of permanent settlements and social hierarchies. The circular structures at Göbekli Tepe, designated as enclosures A through D in preliminary excavations with additional enclosures identified through geophysical surveys, demonstrate architectural planning and construction capabilities that far exceed expectations for hunter-gatherer populations. Each enclosure contains multiple T-shaped pillars arranged in concentric rings, with 2 larger central pillars surrounded by smaller perimeter pillars connected by stone walls. The central pillars in enclosure D stand 5.5 meters tall and weigh approximately 10 tons each, requiring sophisticated quarrying, transportation, and erection techniques that conventional archaeology cannot adequately explain using only the simple tools available to Neolithic populations. The pillars at Göbekli Tepe display elaborate carvings depicting animals, abstract symbols, and anthropomorphic figures executed with artistic skill and precision that rivals work from much later periods when metal tools were available. The carvings include lions, boars, foxes, gazelles, snakes, and birds, rendered in high relief with anatomical accuracy and dynamic poses. Many pillars feature human hands positioned near the base, suggesting the T-shaped forms represent stylized human figures. The artistic sophistication and symbolic complexity of these carvings indicate that the builders possessed advanced cultural development, including symbolic thinking, artistic traditions, and possibly religious or philosophical systems. Astronomical analysis of the site's layout by archaeoastronomer Giulio Magli revealed that the structures incorporate alignments to specific stellar positions that would have been prominent in the night sky during the 10th millennium BC. Enclosure D appears oriented toward the setting position of Sirius, the brightest star in Earth's night sky, while other enclosures align with the belt stars of Orion and the Pleiades star cluster. These alignments require detailed knowledge of stellar positions and their seasonal movements, indicating systematic astronomical observation programs and the development of calendrical systems based on celestial phenomena. The construction sequence at Göbekli Tepe reveals that the oldest structures display the greatest architectural sophistication and artistic achievement, with later phases showing gradual decline in technical quality and decorative elaboration. This pattern contradicts conventional models of technological progress that assume capabilities improve over time through accumulated experience and innovation. The earliest enclosures feature the largest pillars, most elaborate carvings, and most precise astronomical alignments, while structures built in subsequent centuries use smaller stones, simpler decorative schemes, and less accurate orientations. Excavations have revealed that Göbekli Tepe was deliberately buried around 8000 BC through systematic backfilling with thousands of cubic meters of earth and debris. This intentional burial preserved the structures in remarkable condition, but raises questions about why the builders invested enormous effort to conceal their monuments. Some researchers suggest the burial represented a ritual closure ceremony, while others propose it was designed to protect the structures and their encoded knowledge for future discovery. The precision and thoroughness of the burial operation indicates it was carefully planned and executed according to specific protocols rather than representing simple abandonment. The labour requirements for constructing Göbekli Tepe challenge assumptions about hunter-gatherer social organisation and economic capabilities. Estimates suggest that quarrying, transporting, carving and erecting the pillars would have required coordinated labour by hundreds of workers sustained over extended periods. The site shows evidence of large-scale feasting activities, with bones from thousands of wild animals found in archaeological deposits, suggesting that workers were provisioned through organised food production and distribution systems. This level of social organisation and economic coordination supposedly did not exist among mobile hunter-gatherer populations, yet the archaeological evidence clearly demonstrates these capabilities existed in the 10th millennium BC. Analysis of the decorative patterns on pottery from Tell Sorn by archaeoastronomer Alexander Thom revealed mathematical relationships corresponding to precise astronomical observations of planetary movements, lunar cycles, and stellar positions. These decorations, dating to 6000 BC, demonstrate knowledge of the precessional cycle, a phenomenon requiring continuous observation, spanning multiple generations to detect and centuries more to calculate accurately. The geometric patterns painted on ceramic vessels from the site incorporate angular measurements, proportional relationships, and symbolic arrangements that encode sophisticated astronomical data within seemingly decorative motifs. Tom's analysis, conducted during the 1970s using photographic documentation from the original excavations, identified specific angular relationships in the pottery decorations that correspond to the synodic periods of Venus and Mars. The synodic period represents the time required for a planet to return to the same position relative to Earth and the Sun, a cycle that varies for each planet and requires systematic observation over multiple years to calculate accurately. Venus completes its synodic cycle in approximately 584 days, while Mars requires approximately 780 days. The pottery patterns from Tel Es-Sarwan incorporate geometric divisions that represent these periods with remarkable precision. The most significant astronomical knowledge encoded in the Tel Es-Sarwan pottery relates to the precessional cycle, the slow wobble of Earth's rotational axis that causes the position of celestial north to shift over a period of approximately 25,920 years. This phenomenon was not officially discovered by Western astronomy until the work of Greek astronomer Hipparchus in the 2nd century BC, yet the pottery decorations from 6th millennium BC Mesopotamia demonstrate clear understanding of precessional mechanics through geometric relationships that encode this long-term cycle. The decorative schemes on several vessels incorporate divisions based on the number 72, which represents the number of years required for the equinoctial point to shift 1 degree along the ecliptic due to precession. This highly specific number appears repeatedly in the pottery patterns through geometric divisions, angular measurements, and proportional relationships that cannot be coincidental. The consistent use of 72 and its multiples across multiple vessels from different contexts at the site indicates systematic knowledge of precessional mechanics, rather than accidental numerical coincidence. Additional pottery from Tel Es-Sarwan displays decorative patterns incorporating the number 432,000, a fundamental constant in ancient astronomical calculations that appears in Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Hindu, and other ancient cosmological systems. This number represents exactly 200 complete precessional cycles, and appears to have served as a basic unit for measuring vast time periods in ancient chronological systems. The incorporation of this number into pottery decorations from 6000 BC suggests that sophisticated astronomical knowledge and long-term cyclical calculations were already well established thousands of years before the emergence of known civilizations. The mathematical sophistication demonstrated in the Tel Es-Sarwan pottery extends beyond astronomical encoding to include geometric principles that would not be formally recognized until much later periods. Several vessels display decorations incorporating the golden ratio, a mathematical constant approximately equal to 1.618 that appears frequently in natural growth patterns and has been used throughout history and architecture and art to create aesthetically pleasing proportions. The presence of golden ratio relationships in 6th millennium BC pottery indicates advanced mathematical understanding and systematic application of geometric principles. The pottery decorations also incorporate base 60 mathematical notations, the sexagesimal system developed by the Sumerians and still used today for measuring time and angles. Several vessels display geometric divisions based on 60 and its multiples, including 360-degree circular divisions that match the angular measurement system used throughout ancient Mesopotamian astronomy. The appearance of base 60 mathematics in pottery from 6000 BC predates the earliest known Sumerian cuneiform tablets by over 3,000 years, suggesting this sophisticated numerical system was developed during earlier prehistoric periods. Chemical analysis of the pottery manufacturing techniques revealed advanced ceramic technology, including temperature control during firing that achieved specific material properties, use of mineral additives that enhanced clay characteristics, and surface treatments that created decorative effects while also improving vessel functionality. The technical knowledge required for these ceramic achievements indicates understanding of material science principles, including thermal dynamics, chemical reactions, and crystal structure formation that far exceeded capabilities typically attributed to Neolithic populations. The distribution of astronomically encoded pottery across multiple contexts at Tellus saw one, including domestic areas, burial contexts, and apparent ritual spaces suggests that astronomical knowledge was widely disseminated throughout the community, rather than being restricted to specialized elite groups. This pattern contrasts with later Mesopotamian civilizations, where astronomical knowledge became increasingly concentrated within priestly classes and temple institutions. The widespread distribution of encoded astronomical information in 6th millennium BC pottery suggests that prehistoric societies maintained different approaches to knowledge preservation and transmission than the hierarchical systems that emerged in later urban civilizations. The precision stone cutting methods demonstrated at antediluvian sites like Göbekli Tepe reveal construction capabilities that exceed conventional explanations based on primitive tools and manual labor. The T-shaped pillars show evidence of cutting, drilling, and shaping techniques that achieve tolerances measured in millimeters across surfaces spanning several meters, requiring tools and methods that have no equivalent in the documented technological progression of human civilization. The largest pillars at the site weigh up to 16 tons and stand over 5 meters tall, yet they display surface finishes and dimensional accuracy that modern stonemasons recognize as requiring advanced tools and sophisticated techniques. The quarrying methods used to extract the massive limestone blocks from bedrock demonstrate knowledge of stone fracture mechanics and controlled splitting techniques. Examination of the quarry areas adjacent to Göbekli Tepe reveals systematic extraction patterns where workers created precise separation planes through the strategic placement of splitting forces. The technique involved carving narrow channels along the intended separation lines, then inserting wooden wedges that were soaked with water to create expansion forces that fractured the stone along predetermined paths. This method requires detailed understanding of stone grain structure, fracture propagation, and mechanical force application that supposedly was not developed until thousands of years later. The transportation of multi-ton stone blocks from quarry to construction site presents enormous technical challenges that conventional archaeology struggles to explain using only the simple tools available to Neolithic populations. The largest pillars would have required moving 16-ton loads across uneven terrain, without benefit of wheeled vehicles, metal tools, or draft animals. Experimental archaeology attempts to replicate these transportation achievements using primitive techniques have demonstrated that moving such massive stones requires hundreds of workers and sophisticated coordination. Yet these experiments typically achieve much lower efficiency than the original builders, who transported dozens of massive pillars over several centuries of construction activity. The carving techniques used to create the elaborate animal reliefs on the Göbekli Tepe pillars demonstrate artistic capabilities and tool control that exceed expectations for Stone Age craftsmen. The carvings achieve depth variations of several centimeters, create undercut details that require specialized carving tools, and maintain consistent artistic styles across multiple pillars, suggesting coordinated artistic traditions or individual master craftsmen working over extended periods. Analysis of tool marks on the carved surfaces reveals patterns consistent with metal implement use, though conventional chronology places the development of metal tools thousands of years after Göbekli Tepe's construction. The erection of massive T-shaped pillars required sophisticated understanding of leverage principles, center of gravity calculations, and structural stability. Each pillar needed to be positioned vertically in prepared stone sockets, then carefully adjusted to achieve precise alignment with astronomical targets while maintaining structural integrity. The largest central pillars in some enclosures lean slightly, suggesting intentional tilting to achieve specific angular relationships or compensate for optical effects when viewed from particular positions. This level of engineering precision indicates advanced understanding of structural mechanics and geometric relationships. The drilling techniques used at Göbekli Tepe for creating decorative elements and possible mounting points for additional structures demonstrate capabilities that far exceed simple percussion drilling with stone tools. Several pillars contain precisely circular holes drilled to depths of several centimeters, with consistent diameters maintained throughout the drilling depth. Modern analysis of these drill holes reveals smooth interior surfaces and parallel sides that indicate rotational drilling using specialized boring implements rather than simple hammering techniques. The precision achieved in these holes suggests the use of bow drills or similar rotational tools combined with abrasive compounds that enhanced cutting efficiency. The architectural planning evident in the Göbekli Tepe enclosures demonstrates sophisticated design capabilities, including circular geometry, symmetrical arrangements, and integrated astronomical alignments. Each enclosure was designed as a complete unified structure rather than being built incrementally through trial and error. The positioning of pillars follows precise geometric patterns based on circular divisions and radial symmetry, requiring detailed planning and accurate measurement during construction. The consistency of design principles across multiple enclosures built over several centuries indicates transmission of architectural knowledge through systematic training and institutional continuity. The integration of astronomical alignments into the architectural design required coordination between astronomical observers who determined optimal orientations and construction teams who implemented these alignments during building. The precision achieved in stellar alignments indicates that builders could accurately transfer astronomical observations into physical architectural features, suggesting the use of surveying instruments and geometric layout tools. Some enclosures incorporate multiple simultaneous alignments to different celestial targets, requiring sophisticated understanding of three-dimensional geometry and the ability to calculate optimal pillar positions that satisfied multiple alignment criteria. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe around 8000 BC involved systematic backfilling that protected the structures, while also requiring enormous labour investment. The backfill material included thousands of tons of earth, broken stone, and animal bones deposited in organised layers that suggest careful planning rather than random dumping. Some researchers estimate that burying the site required as much labour as original construction, raising questions about why builders would invest such effort in concealment. The thoroughness of burial and the preservation it achieved suggest intentional protection of the structures and their encoded knowledge for future discovery. The Sumerian account of the Great Flood preserved in the fragmentary tablets from Nippur provides the earliest written record of this global catastrophe, describing technical details about water levels, duration periods, and survival strategies that suggest eyewitness observation rather than mythological invention. The text describes Ziusudra, a priest-king of Shurupak, who received direct warnings from Enki about an impending deluge designed to eliminate human civilization. The most complete version of this narrative, designated Tablet CBS 10,673 in the University of Pennsylvania collection, dates to approximately 1700 BC, but clearly copies from much earlier sources based on archaic linguistic features and references to antediluvian cities. The Ziusudra narrative begins with a fragmentary section describing conflicts among the gods about the fate of humanity, with some divine beings advocating for preservation while others demanded complete destruction. Enki, described as the god of wisdom and subterranean waters, decided to warn Ziusudra about the coming catastrophe despite opposition from other divine authorities. The text describes how Enki spoke to Ziusudra through a reed wall, providing detailed instructions for constructing a survival vessel and preserving human and animal life through the flood period. The construction specifications provided in the flood narrative demonstrate technical knowledge about naval architecture and waterproofing methods. The vessel was to be built using specific dimensional ratios, with length 7 times the width and height equal to width, creating proportions that modern naval architecture recognizes as optimal for stability in rough water conditions. The text specifies that the structure should be sealed with bitumen applied in multiple layers both inside and outside, a waterproofing technique that required knowledge of bitumen properties and application methods. Archaeological evidence from ancient Mesopotamian sites confirms that bitumen was extensively used for waterproofing applications, including boats, buildings, and water storage facilities. The flood narrative provides specific information about the duration and intensity of the catastrophe. The text states that the storm raged for 7 days and 7 nights, during which the massive boat was tossed about by the tempest. After the initial storm period, the waters remained at peak levels for an extended period before gradually receding. The total duration from flood onset to final water recession matches closely with flood duration periods specified in other ancient flood narratives from different cultures, suggesting these accounts preserve memories of the same historical event, rather than representing independent mythological developments. The description of the flood's onset includes details suggesting both meteorological and geological catastrophe. The text describes the storm's fury, the breaking open of the fountains of the great deep, and the opening of the floodgates of heaven, indicating both heavy rainfall and groundwater release, or possibly tsunami events. These combined water sources would have produced flooding far more severe than normal riverine overflow, capable of covering vast geographical areas and destroying established settlements. The geological evidence from Mesopotamian sites confirms that extraordinary flooding occurred during the early 3rd millennium BC, with deposits indicating water sources beyond normal river flooding. The survival strategy described in the Ziusudra narrative extends beyond simple vessel construction to include preservation of knowledge and cultural materials. The text indicates that Ziusudra was instructed to bring aboard not only representatives of animal species, but also the tablets of wisdom containing essential knowledge about astronomy, mathematics, agriculture, and other civilizational arts. This emphasis on knowledge preservation appears consistently across multiple flood narratives from different cultures, suggesting that ancient peoples recognize catastrophic events as threats not only to physical survival, but also to cultural continuity and accumulated knowledge. The post-flood section of the narrative describes Ziusudra's vessel coming to rest on a mountain, the gradual recession of waters, and the emergence of dry land where survivors could re-establish civilization. The text provides specific details about Ziusudra, sending out birds to determine whether land had appeared, a detail that appears in virtually identical form in the Akkadian flood narrative featuring Utnapishtim and the later Hebrew account of Noah. The consistency of this specific detail across multiple independent sources suggests it preserves genuine procedural knowledge about determining land presence during flood conditions, rather than representing literary borrowing between cultures. The divine response to successful survival receives detailed treatment in the Sumerian version, describing how the gods were pleased that humanity had been preserved and granted Ziusudra extended life and divine status as a reward for his obedience and effective execution of preservation instructions. The text states that Ziusudra was given life like a god and made to dwell in Dilmun, the land of the living, suggesting that successful flood survivors achieved enhanced status and possibly extended lifespans through divine intervention or advanced medical knowledge. The geological record provides compelling physical confirmation of catastrophic flooding in Mesopotamia during the early 3rd millennium BC through documentation of sterile clay layers approximately 8 feet thick that separate earlier cultural deposits from later Sumerian civilization. Excavations at conducted by Leonard Woolley between 1922 and 1934 uncovered these flood deposits dated to approximately 2900 BC through stratigraphic analysis. Revealed that similar flood deposits at other Mesopotamian sites dated to different periods, suggesting multiple major flooding events rather than a single universal deluge. The flood deposit at Ur consisted of clean water-laid clay completely devoid of cultural materials, separating earlier occupation levels containing sophisticated pottery and architectural remains from later levels showing different cultural characteristics. The thickness and extent of this sterile layer indicated that flooding had covered the entire site to substantial depth, remaining at peak levels long enough for fine clay particles to settle out of suspension and create the thick homogeneous deposit. The absence of any cultural materials within the flood layer suggested that human occupation ceased completely during the flooding period. Similar flood deposits have been identified at Kish, Shuruppak, Uruk, and Lagash, though detailed stratigraphic analysis reveals these floods occurred at different times across different sites. The Kish flood deposit dates to approximately 3100 BC, while the Shuruppak evidence points to 2900 BC, and the Uruk flooding appears to have occurred around 2800 BC. This variation in flood timing initially suggested that the deposits represented local river flooding events, rather than a single catastrophic global deluge. However, more recent geological research on the Younger Dryas period has identified evidence for much earlier global-scale flooding associated with rapid climate change and ice sheet collapse. The Younger Dryas period, dating from approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, represents one of the most dramatic and rapid climate shifts documented in Earth's geological history. Ice core data from Greenland reveals that temperatures dropped by as much as 15 degrees Celsius in some regions within a matter of decades, marking an abrupt return to glacial conditions after a warming trend that had lasted several thousand years. This climate reversal was accompanied by massive changes in precipitation patterns, sea level fluctuations, and catastrophic flooding in multiple regions worldwide. The hypothesis that a cosmic impact event triggered the Younger Dryas climate change has gained substantial support from geological evidence discovered at sites across North America, Europe, and Asia. Sediment layers dating to 12,900 years ago contain elevated concentrations of iridium, nanodiamonds, magnetic spherules, and other materials consistent with extraterrestrial impact. The distribution of these impact markers across multiple continents indicates that a fragmented comet or asteroid struck Earth, possibly creating multiple impact sites that generated continental-scale wildfires and massive atmospheric disruption. Carbon spherules found in Younger Dryas boundary sediments show evidence of exposure to temperatures exceeding 2,200 degrees Celsius, consistent with impact-generated conflagrations that burned across vast areas of North America and possibly other continents. These microscopic particles contain trapped gases with isotopic signatures matching those found in impact craters, providing strong evidence that the spherules formed during cosmic impact events rather than through normal wildfire processes. The concentration and distribution of carbon spherules suggests that fires burned simultaneously across millions of square kilometers. The impact event would have generated massive tsunamis if fragments struck ocean areas, creating waves potentially hundreds of meters high that could have traveled thousands of kilometers inland. Computer modeling of potential impact scenarios shows that a fragmented comet striking the North Atlantic could have produced tsunamis capable of inundating coastal areas across multiple continents, carrying marine sediments far inland and creating flood deposits in locations distant from normal ocean influence. Evidence of marine sediments in geological layers corresponding to the Younger Dryas period has been found at locations hundreds of kilometers from current coastlines. The rapid climate change associated with the Younger Dryas period coincided with mass extinction events that eliminated approximately 75% of large mammal species in North America and significant percentages on other continents. The extinction pattern shows remarkable synchronicity with species disappearing within a narrow time frame that matches the Younger Dryas onset. This mass extinction event affected mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, dire wolves, and numerous other megafauna species fundamentally altering ecosystems across multiple continents. The convergence of flood narratives across more than 500 documented cultures worldwide presents details so specific and uniform that they challenge conventional explanations of independent mythological development. The Hopi tradition describes a world destroyed by water after the blue star Kachina appeared in the sky, specifying that the flood lasted exactly 150 days, matching precisely the duration given in Mesopotamian sources. The consistency of flood duration across cultures separated by vast distances and lacking any historical contact suggests these accounts preserve memories of actual events rather than representing independent mythological inventions. The Cherokee tradition speaks of a great flood that covered the highest mountains, with survivors taking refuge in a great boat built according to divine instructions. Their account specifies that the flood began during the season when leaves were full on the trees, providing a seasonal timing indicator that appears in multiple other flood traditions from different cultures. The Maya Popol Vuh describes floods that destroyed previous world ages, with survivors preserving themselves through construction of boats sealed with pitch, matching the waterproofing techniques specified in Mesopotamian flood accounts. Australian Aboriginal traditions from the Bunjalung people describe the Great Flood of Narangura, which occurred when the rainbow serpent stirred the waters, causing them to rise and drown the ancient world. Their oral traditions specify that the waters rose for 7 days and 7 nights, then remained at peak level for an additional period before gradually receding. Temporal markers that align precisely with flood chronologies recorded in ancient Near Eastern texts. The precision of these temporal specifications across cultures that had no contact until modern times suggests preservation of actual event details rather than symbolic mythological frameworks. The Maasai of East Africa preserve accounts of Tumbai, the great flood that destroyed the First World. Their tradition describes how Tumbai warned one righteous man to build a boat and take animals aboard before the waters covered the highest mountains, a narrative structure that appears in virtually identical form across multiple continents. The Maasai account includes specific details about boat construction using acacia wood and animal skins, materials that would have been readily available in their environment and that match the practical shipbuilding knowledge found in other flood traditions. Polynesian cultures throughout the Pacific maintain flood traditions that predate their arrival on current island homes, suggesting these accounts were carried from earlier mainland locations. The Tahitian account describes the god Ruahatu causing the waters to rise until only the highest peaks remained above the surface, specifying that the flood occurred during a time when the stars danced differently in the sky, a phrase suggesting astronomical disturbances that accompanied the inundation. Similar accounts from Hawaii, Samoa, and New Zealand contain identical references to celestial anomalies occurring simultaneously with the flood. The global distribution of flood narratives sharing specific technical details about duration, boat construction, animal preservation, and astronomical phenomena suggests these accounts derive from common sources or preserve memories of actual global catastrophic events. The consistency extends to details about divine warnings provided to selected individuals, specific instructions for survival vessel construction, including dimensional ratios and waterproofing methods, the sending of birds to determine when land appeared, and the granting of special status to survivors. These shared technical details across cultures lacking historical contact argue strongly for common origins based on actual events, rather than independent mythological development. The ancient city of Dwarka, described in Hindu texts as Krishna's capital, has been located off the coast of Gujarat, India, at depths of up to 40 meters through marine archaeological surveys, revealing massive stone structures including walls, gates, and harbour facilities constructed from precisely fitted megalithic blocks. The Dwarka ruins extend over several square kilometres of seafloor, indicating a city of substantial size and complexity that was submerged as sea levels rose following the last ice age. marine archaeological investigations conducted by the National Institute of Oceanography, beginning in 1983 under the direction of Dr. SR. Rao have documented extensive structural remains that match descriptions found in the Mahabharata and other ancient Sanskrit texts. The underwater structures at Dwarka include massive stone blocks arranged in geometric patterns suggesting planned urban layouts with distinct residential, commercial and ceremonial districts. The blocks demonstrate precision-fitting techniques with joints so tight that modern divers report difficulty inserting thin blades between adjacent stones. This construction method parallels techniques found at other ancient megalithic sites worldwide, including Sacsayhuaman in Peru and the temple platforms at Baalbek and Lebanon, suggesting shared architectural knowledge or common cultural origins across vast geographical distances. Sonar surveys of the Dwarka site have revealed features consistent with ancient harbour installations, including what appear to be docking areas, breakwaters, and navigational channels carved through bedrock. These harbour facilities indicate that Dwarka functioned as a major maritime centre, supporting extensive sea trade and naval operations. The scale and sophistication of the harbour infrastructure suggests the city possessed advanced engineering capabilities and coordinated labour forces capable of moving multi-ton stone blocks and executing complex underwater construction projects. Carbon dating of wood samples recovered from the submerged structures indicates construction periods spanning several millennia, with the oldest elements dating to approximately 7,500 years ago. This dating places Dwarka's earliest construction phases during the Middle Holocene period, when sea levels were rising rapidly due to post-glacial ice sheet melting. The city appears to have been constructed originally on coastal land that was subsequently inundated as ocean levels rose, eventually submerging the entire urban complex beneath dozens of meters of water. Artifacts recovered from the Dwarka site include pottery, tools, and decorative objects that demonstrate cultural continuity with later Indian civilizations, while also showing unique characteristics suggesting earlier independent development. The ceramic vessels display sophisticated manufacturing techniques, including wheel throwing, high-temperature firing, and decorative glazing that supposedly were not developed in the Indian subcontinent until much later periods. The presence of these advanced ceramic technologies in contexts dating to the 6th and 7th millennia BC challenges conventional chronologies of technological development in South Asia. The Yonaguni monument off the coast of Japan presents another compelling example of submerged megalithic architecture that predates known civilizations. Discovered in 1986 by dive tour operator Kihachiro Arataki. The structure consists of massive stone platforms, apparent staircases, and carved channels that extend over an area approximately 120 meters long and 40 meters wide at depths reaching 25 meters below current sea level. The geometric precision of the structure's features has generated intense debate about whether it represents natural geological formations or artificial construction. Marine geologist Masaki Kimura of the University of the Ryukyus has conducted extensive investigations of the Yonaguni monument, documenting features that include right angles, straight edges, and parallel surfaces occurring in combinations that he argues are extremely unlikely to result from natural geological processes. The structure includes what appear to be staircases with uniform step heights, terraced platforms arranged in systematic patterns, and carved channels that follow geometric layouts. Tool marks visible on some surfaces show characteristics consistent with deliberate carving rather than natural erosion or fracturing. The dating of the Yonaguni monument relies on geological evidence indicating when the structure was last above sea level. Sea level reconstructions based on coral reef data and ice core evidence suggest the area was exposed during the last glacial maximum, when ocean levels were approximately 120 meters lower than present. The structure would have been submerged as sea levels rose following the end of the Ice Age, placing its construction period potentially between 12,000 and 10,000 years ago, thousands of years before the development of known civilizations in the region. The Mediterranean Sea contains numerous submerged settlements along coastlines that were exposed during periods of lower sea level. The ancient city of Pavlopetri off the coast of southern Greece represents one of the most complete underwater urban sites ever discovered, containing streets, buildings, courtyards, and tombs arranged in organised patterns indicating sophisticated urban planning. Marine archaeological surveys conducted by the University of Nottingham between 2009 and 2011 documented the site's layout using advanced sonar mapping and photogrammetry techniques that created detailed three-dimensional models of the submerged structures. Pavlopetri covers approximately 50,000 square metres of seafloor at depths between 3 and 4 metres, containing at least 15 separate buildings arranged along streets that follow regular grid patterns. The urban planning demonstrates sophisticated design principles, including rectangular building plots, intersecting streets meeting at right angles, and centralised areas that may have served ceremonial or administrative functions. The site includes evidence of advanced water management systems with channels, basins, and what appear to be fountains or ritual pools designed to collect, distribute and display water within the urban environment. The construction date for Pavlopetri remains uncertain due to the challenges of dating submerged structures, but pottery and artifacts recovered from the site indicate occupation during the early Bronze Age around 3000 BC. Though some architectural elements may be significantly older, the site's excellent preservation beneath Mediterranean waters has protected architectural details that would have been destroyed by weathering if exposed on land, providing unprecedented insights into Bronze Age urban design and construction techniques. The submersion of vast continental shelf areas during post-glacial sea level rise destroyed enormous regions that could have supported substantial human populations and advanced civilizations. At the peak of the last glaciation approximately 20,000 years ago, global sea level stood between 100 and 140 metres lower than current levels, exposing extensive coastal plains that are now submerged beneath hundreds of feet of water. The Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia connected the Indonesian archipelago, Malaysia, and parts of Thailand in a single land mass, covering more than 1.8 million square kilometres, an area larger than modern Alaska. This exposed landmass, known as Sunderland, supported diverse ecosystems, including major river systems that drained the continental interior and created fertile valleys ideal for agricultural development. The gradual submersion of Sunderland as sea levels rose would have displaced millions of people and destroyed any archaeological evidence of civilizations that developed in this region. The presence of sophisticated maritime cultures in Southeast Asia during later periods suggests that earlier populations in Sunderland possessed advanced nautical technologies and coastal adaptation strategies that enabled them to survive and relocate as their lands were inundated. The Persian Gulf was completely exposed during the last ice age, forming a vast river valley fed by the combined waters of the Tigris, Euphrates, Karun, and other regional rivers. This fertile valley would have provided ideal conditions for agricultural development and urban civilization, with abundant fresh water, rich alluvial soils, and strategic location connecting Mesopotamia with the Arabian Peninsula and the Indian Ocean trade networks. The gradual flooding of this area as sea levels rose could account for the flood traditions preserved in Mesopotamian cultures, representing actual historical memories of lands being inundated rather than mythological constructs. Metallurgical artifacts from Neolithic sites throughout Mesopotamia include copper and gold objects that exhibit sophisticated alloying techniques and precision manufacturing methods that supposedly did not exist in pre-dynastic periods. The Pitt Rivers Museum's collection of Naqada metalwork from Egypt contains examples of copper tools that show evidence of advanced smelting processes and quality control measures, with chemical composition indicating access to ore sources and purification methods that parallel those described in later Mesopotamian texts. Analysis of these prehistoric metal objects reveals manufacturing capabilities that challenge conventional models of gradual technological development from simple hammering of native metals to complex extraction and alloying processes. Copper artifacts from Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, dating to approximately 7000 BC, demonstrate smelting techniques that required achieving temperatures above 1085 degrees Celsius in controlled atmospheric conditions. The production of metallic copper from oxide ores demands not only high temperatures, but also reducing atmospheres that prevent reoxidation of the metal during cooling. Archaeological evidence from early metallurgical sites reveals the use of sophisticated furnace designs, bellows systems for air supply control, and flux materials that facilitated slag separation, indicating systematic understanding of chemical processes rather than accidental discoveries through random experimentation. The chemical composition of prehistoric bronze artifacts reveals precise control over alloy ratios that optimize material properties for specific applications. Bronze tools from early Mesopotamian contexts show tin content ranging from 8 to 12%, proportions that modern metallurgy recognizes as ideal for creating implements with optimal combinations of hardness, toughness, and workability. Achieving these precise alloy compositions required accurate measurement of component metals and understanding of how different ratios affected final material properties, capabilities that supposedly were not developed until much later periods. Gold artifacts from pre-dynastic Egyptian sites display manufacturing techniques including granulation, filigree work, and cloisonné that require sophisticated control of heat, precise manipulation of molten metal, and understanding of surface tension and adhesion principles. Granulation, a decorative technique involving the attachment of tiny gold spheres to metal surfaces, demands heating to exact temperatures that melt the spheres sufficiently for bonding without causing them to collapse or merge. The mastery of this technique in contexts dating to 4000 BC indicates advanced metallurgical knowledge and specialized training systems for transmitting technical skills. The sources of metal ores used in prehistoric context reveal extensive trade networks and geological knowledge that enabled identification and exploitation of distant mineral deposits. Chemical analysis of copper artifacts from early Mesopotamian sites indicates ore sources in the Taurus Mountains of Anatolia, over 1,000 kilometers from the manufacturing locations. The identification of these ore bodies required systematic prospecting, geological knowledge for recognizing mineralization indicators, an understanding of ore quality assessment methods. The existence of long-distance ore trade during the 6th and 7th millennia BC demonstrates economic organization and transportation capabilities far beyond simple village-level societies. Silver metallurgy in prehistoric contexts presents particular challenges because silver rarely occurs in native form and typically must be extracted from lead-silver ores through a process called cupellation. This technique requires heating the ore to high temperatures in oxidizing conditions that convert lead to lithoid while leaving purified silver. The process demands precise temperature control, understanding of oxidation reduction chemistry, and specialized equipment including porous ceramic vessels that absorb lead oxide. Archaeological evidence of cupellation dating to the 4th millennium BC indicates sophisticated metallurgical knowledge and systematic application of complex chemical processes. The heat treatment of copper alloys to enhance material properties through controlled heating and cooling cycles demonstrates understanding of metallurgical principles that would not be formally recognized until modern materials science. Archaeological evidence reveals that prehistoric metalworkers employed annealing processes to soften work-hardened metals, enabling additional shaping operations, and quenching techniques that increased hardness in specific alloy compositions. These thermal treatments require understanding of how heating affects metal, crystal structure, and the ability to control cooling rates to achieve desired properties. Clay jars discovered during excavations in Baghdad during the 1930s contained copper cylinders and iron rods, that demonstrate characteristics consistent with galvanic cells capable of producing electrical voltages. These artifacts, dating to approximately 250 BC to 250 AD, consist of ceramic vessels sealed with bitumen and containing copper tubes with iron cores that, when filled with acidic solutions, produce voltages of approximately 1.1 volts. The discovery of these devices, commonly known as Baghdad batteries, was made by German archaeologist Wilhelm König while cataloguing artifacts in the Iraq Museum. Though the original discovery context remains somewhat unclear due to limited documentation from the early excavation period, the construction of the Baghdad battery assemblies shows deliberate design rather than accidental chemical reactions. The copper cylinders measure approximately 13 centimeters in height and are precisely fitted within ceramic vessels with iron rods positioned to avoid contact with the copper while maintaining electrical continuity through electrolyte solutions. The bitumen seals prevent leakage and contamination, indicating understanding of the chemical requirements for sustained electrical generation. Multiple examples of these devices have been discovered at various Mesopotamian sites, including Kujut Rabu and Ctesiphon, suggesting they were produced in quantities rather than representing experimental curiosities. Analysis of metal artifacts found near Baghdad battery sites has revealed evidence of electroplating techniques that would require electrical current for their production. Silver-plated copper objects and gold-plated jewellery show uniform coating thickness and adhesion characteristics, consistent with electrochemical deposition, rather than mechanical application or mercury amalgam gilding. The quality of these platings matches results achieved through modern electroplating processes, indicating that ancient craftsmen understood principles of electrical metal deposition and could control current flow to achieve desired coating properties. Experimental replications of Baghdad batteries using various electrolyte solutions including vinegar, wine, and citrus juices have successfully generated voltages ranging from 0.5 to 1.1 volts, depending on electrolyte composition and concentration. When multiple units are connected in series, these voltages can be increased to levels sufficient for electroplating applications. Researchers at the Fraunhofer Institute demonstrated that replica Baghdad batteries could successfully electroplate gold onto silver substrates, using techniques that match the quality observed on ancient artifacts. The discovery of similar galvanic devices at sites throughout the ancient world suggests that electrochemical knowledge may have been more widespread than previously recognized. Artifacts resembling Baghdad batteries have been found in Egypt dating to the Ptolemaic period, in India associated with early medieval contexts, and in other regions where advanced metallurgy was practiced. The consistency of design elements across these geographically separated finds suggests common technological traditions or transmission of electrochemical knowledge through ancient trade and communication networks. The purposes for which ancient peoples employed electrical generation remain subjects of debate and speculation. Beyond electroplating applications, some researchers have proposed that the devices were used for medical applications, including electrotherapy for pain relief, a practice that appears in later Egyptian and Greek medical texts. Other proposed uses include electrical stimulation during religious ceremonies to create experiences interpreted as divine contact, though direct evidence for these applications remains limited. The Plimpton 322 tablet, dating to approximately 1800 BC, contains trigonometric calculations demonstrating understanding of mathematical relationships not officially rediscovered until the Greek period. The sophistication of these calculations, which include Pythagorean triples and solutions to complex geometric problems, suggest transmission of knowledge from earlier sources rather than contemporary mathematical development. The tablet, currently housed in Columbia University's Rare Book and Manuscript Library, was acquired by publisher George Arthur Plimpton in the 1920s from an archaeological dealer who claimed it originated from the ancient city of Larsa in southern Iraq. The tablet contains 15 rows of numbers arranged in 4 columns that represent sets of Pythagorean triples, whole number solutions to the equation a squared plus b squared equals c squared. The numbers are expressed in the Babylonian sexagesimal base 60 system and demonstrate systematic generation of these triples using sophisticated mathematical techniques. The range of numbers included on the tablet extends from small, easily calculated triples to extremely large values requiring advanced computational methods, indicating that the ancient mathematicians possessed algorithms for generating Pythagorean triples, rather than discovering them through trial and error. Mathematical analysis by historians Otto Neugebauer and Abraham Sachs during the 1940s revealed that the tablet's numbers are arranged according to the ratio of the short side to the hypotenuse of right triangles, suggesting the document served as a reference table for solving geometric problems. The systematic organization and the specific range of values included indicate the tablet was designed for practical applications rather than theoretical exploration. Though the level of mathematical sophistication required for its creation far exceeds simple surveying or construction calculations, the tablet includes entries with values exceeding 12,000, numbers far larger than necessary for any practical measurement applications in ancient Mesopotamia. The inclusion of these large numbers suggests that the tablet's creators were exploring mathematical relationships for their own sake, or encoding astronomical calculations that required handling very large values. The precision maintained in these large number calculations indicates mastery of base 60 arithmetic and the ability to perform complex multi-step computations without computational errors. The mathematical knowledge required to generate the Plimpton 322 tablet includes understanding of number theory, algebraic relationships, and geometric principles that supposedly were not developed until the Greek mathematical revolution over 1,000 years later. The systematic nature of the triple generation and the absence of any preliminary calculation scratches on the tablet suggest the scribe was copying from existing mathematical tables or applying well-established algorithms, indicating that sophisticated mathematical knowledge existed in Mesopotamia long before the date of this particular tablet. Additional Babylonian mathematical tablets reveal advanced knowledge of quadratic equations, geometric progressions, and compound interest calculations. The El Babylonian collection tablet YBC 7289 contains a sophisticated algorithm for calculating square roots, using an iterative approximation method that converges rapidly to accurate results. This technique demonstrates understanding of numerical analysis principles and systematic problem-solving approaches that parallel modern computational methods. The Great Pyramid of Giza encodes processional knowledge in its fundamental measurements with accuracy not achieved by modern astronomy until the development of precision instruments. The pyramid's base perimeter of 921.45 meters, when divided by its height of 146.59 meters, yields the mathematical constant pi to several decimal places, while the ratio of base perimeter to height multiplied by 43,200 equals the polar radius of Earth to within 99.9% accuracy. These mathematical relationships encoded in the pyramid's dimensions demonstrate knowledge of Earth's size, Hajjasist geometric constants, and astronomical cycles that supposedly were not available to ancient Egyptian builders. The base of the Great Pyramid forms a nearly perfect square, with sides measuring 230.36 meters, 230.39 meters, 230.45 meters, and 230.53 meters, showing maximum deviation of only 17 centimeters across a base exceeding 230 meters per side. This precision represents a tolerance of approximately 0.07%. Accuracy that modern construction projects struggle to achieve even with laser surveying instruments and computer-controlled equipment. The achievement of such precision using ancient tools and methods indicates access to sophisticated surveying techniques and geometric knowledge. The pyramid's orientation to true north achieves accuracy of approximately 3 arc minutes. a precision that requires careful astronomical observations and precise transfer of celestial alignments to ground-based construction. The builder's ability to establish true north so accurately indicates they possess detailed knowledge of stellar positions and systematic methods for converting astronomical observations into architectural alignments. Some researchers propose the alignment was achieved by observing the rising and setting positions of circumpolar stars and bisecting the angle between these positions to establish a true north-south line. The internal passages of the Great Pyramid incorporate astronomical alignments that targeted specific stars visible during the pyramid's construction period. The so-called King's Chamber contains shafts that point toward the constellation Orion and the star Thuban, which served as the North Pole star during the 3rd millennium BC. These alignments required three-dimensional geometric calculations to determine the proper shaft angles that would point toward specific celestial targets from chambers located deep within the pyramid structure. The mathematical constant pi appears in the pyramid's design through the ratio of perimeter to height, equaling 2 pi, suggesting the builders intended to create a structure whose base circumference equals the circumference of a circle, with radius equal to the pyramid's height. This relationship can be achieved either through deliberate incorporation of pi into the design, or through use of a rolling measuring device whose circumference determines the base dimensions. Either explanation requires mathematical sophistication and systematic application of geometric principles. The encoding of Earth's dimensions in the pyramid's measurements suggests the ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge of the planet's size and shape that was not officially rediscovered until the work of Eratosthenes in the 3rd century BC. The pyramid's height of 146.59 meters multiplied by 43,200 equals 6,332 kilometers, which represents the polar radius of Earth to remarkable accuracy. This encoded relationship requires not only knowledge of Earth's actual dimensions, but also the deliberate choice of a scaling factor, 43,200, that represents 1/6 of the precessional cycle in years. The Temple of Edfu in Egypt contains inscriptions describing the builder texts, ancient records that supposedly documented construction techniques and astronomical knowledge used by the original inhabitants of Egypt called the followers of Horus. These texts, carved into temple walls during the Ptolemaic period, claim to preserve information from the first time when divine beings established the foundations of Egyptian civilization following a great catastrophe that destroyed the previous world. The Edfu inscriptions, dating to approximately 237 to 57 BC, represent copies of much earlier sources based on archaic linguistic features and references to astronomical configurations that would have been visible thousands of years before the temple's construction. The builder texts describe how the followers of Horus established sacred sites throughout Egypt, according to precise plans that incorporated astronomical alignments, mathematical proportions, and geometric relationships designed to create structures that functioned as earthly representations of celestial order. The inscriptions provide specific details about foundation ceremonies, the establishment of orientation alignments using stellar observations, and the incorporation of measurement standards based on cosmic constants. The texts state that these divine builders possessed comprehensive knowledge of the stars, understood the movements of celestial bodies across vast time periods, and could predict astronomical events with extraordinary accuracy. The temple inscriptions reference the Island of the Egg, a primordial sacred site where the first divine beings landed after arriving from the celestial realm. This location is described as the place where creation began, where the first land emerged from the primeval waters, and where the fundamental principles governing temple construction were first revealed. The texts indicate that knowledge from this original sacred site was systematically transmitted to other locations throughout Egypt through a network of initiated priests who preserved and implemented the ancient architectural principles. The Edfu texts describe specific architectural features that were required for proper temple construction, including precise cardinal orientation. incorporation of the golden ratio in structural proportions, alignment of internal passages with stellar targets, and acoustic properties that enhanced ritual effectiveness. The inscriptions provide measurement standards expressed in terms of cosmic constants, and describe how these standards should be applied to ensure that earthly structures properly reflected celestial patterns. The level of technical detail in these instructions suggests they were intended as actual building manuals, rather than symbolic religious narratives. References to the great catastrophe that destroyed the previous world appear throughout the Edfu inscriptions, describing how the followers of Horus preserved essential knowledge through this period of destruction, and subsequently re-established civilization according to the ancient patterns. The texts indicate that certain sacred sites were specifically chosen as repositories for knowledge preservation, with information encoded in architectural features, astronomical alignments, and symbolic systems that would survive physical destruction and remain accessible to future generations who possessed the proper interpretive keys. The preservation methods described in the Edfu texts include the creation of underground chambers sealed against water infiltration, the encoding of information in proportional relationships that could be measured and decoded by qualified investigators, and the establishment of hereditary priesthoods trained to maintain and transmit essential knowledge across generations. The texts emphasize that certain knowledge was deliberately concealed from general populations and restricted to initiated individuals who demonstrated proper preparation and motivation for receiving advanced information. The connection between Egyptian temple design and astronomical knowledge becomes explicit in the Edfu inscriptions through detailed descriptions of how stellar positions should determine building orientations, how lunar cycles should govern ritual timing, and how solar movements should be incorporated into architectural features. The texts describe specific stars that should be observed for establishing directional alignments, and provide calculation methods for determining optimal construction timing based on celestial configurations. This systematic integration of astronomical knowledge into architectural practice demonstrates that Egyptian builders understood their structures as functional astronomical instruments, rather than merely symbolic religious monuments. The Sumerian term Abzu, referring to the subterranean freshwater ocean, appears in virtually identical form across multiple ancient languages separated by vast geographical distances. The Egyptian abyss, the Greek abyssos, and the Hebrew tahom all derive from roots that can be traced to Akkadian sources, suggesting either extensive cultural contact or derivation from a common earlier language that predates known civilizational development. Linguistic analysis reveals that these terms share not only phonetic similarities, but also semantic connections, indicating they reference the same conceptual framework about primordial waters existing beneath the Earth's surface. The Sumerian Abzu appears in the earliest cuneiform texts as a physical location associated with Enki, the god of wisdom and subterranean waters, described as dwelling in the Abzu and controlling the freshwater sources that fed rivers, springs, and irrigation systems. The term carries specific technical meanings in Sumerian hydrological texts, referring to underground aquifers and the water table that early Mesopotamian civilizations accessed through wells and managed through sophisticated irrigation engineering. The precision with which Sumerian texts describe the Abzu's characteristics suggests they possessed detailed knowledge of groundwater hydrology and underground water movement. The Egyptian term abyss appears in pyramid texts and coffin texts, with meanings closely paralleling the Sumerian Abzu, describing subterranean waters associated with creation mythology and the origin of life. Egyptian cosmological texts describe how the primeval mound emerged from the abyss waters, establishing the first dry land where creation could commence. The phonetic similarity between the Sumerian Abzu and Egyptian abyss extends beyond coincidence to suggest direct linguistic borrowing or derivation from a common ancestor language. The Greek term abyssos enters the language through contact with Near Eastern cultures, appearing in the Septuagint translation of Hebrew scriptures and in Greek mythological texts describing primordial waters. The term maintains semantic connections with its Semitic predecessors while acquiring additional meanings related to infinite depth and unbounded space. The Greek philosophical tradition incorporated the concept into cosmological frameworks describing the origin and structure of the cosmos, preserving the ancient association between subterranean waters and primordial creation. The Hebrew Tehom appears in Genesis creation narratives describing the deep waters that existed before the formation of dry land, linguistically connected to the Akkadian Tiamat and ultimately to the Sumerian Abzu. The term carries theological significance in Hebrew scriptures, while maintaining technical meanings related to subterranean and oceanic waters. Linguistic analysis reveals that Tehom shares etymological roots with Mesopotamian terms, indicating that Hebrew cosmological concepts incorporated earlier Mesopotamian traditions about primordial waters and creation processes. The widespread distribution of related terms across different language families suggests that knowledge about subterranean waters and their significance for early civilizations was transmitted across vast geographical areas during prehistoric periods. The consistency of both phonetic forms and semantic meanings argues against independent invention and supports models of cultural diffusion or common origin. The technical knowledge embedded in texts using these terms demonstrates that ancient peoples possess sophisticated understanding of hydrology, groundwater systems, and the management of water resources. Additional linguistic connections appear in architectural terminology, shared across ancient civilizations despite geographical separation and apparent lack of direct contact. The Sumerian term ziggurat shares roots with Egyptian pyramid terminology, while both traditions use related words for describing temple platforms, sacred mountains, and structures designed to connect earthly and celestial realms. These linguistic parallels extend to technical vocabulary, describing construction methods, measurement systems, and astronomical orientation procedures, suggesting transmission of specialized knowledge through professional networks of builders and astronomers. Mathematical terminology shows remarkable consistency across ancient languages, with terms for specific geometric concepts, numerical operations, and calculation procedures appearing in closely related forms from Mesopotamia to Egypt to the Indus Valley. The base 60 sexagesimal system developed in Sumer appears in modified forms throughout the ancient world, with related terminology for describing fractions, multiples, and positional notation. This mathematical linguistic continuity indicates that advanced mathematical knowledge spread through ancient trade networks and scholarly exchanges. Religious and mythological terminology demonstrates extensive borrowing and adaptation across ancient civilizations with divine names, cosmological concepts, and ritual vocabulary showing clear etymological relationships. The Sumerian Inanna becomes the Akkadian Ishtar, related to the Phoenician Astarte and possibly connected to Greek Aphrodite, suggesting that religious concepts and the deities associated with them were transmitted across cultural boundaries while maintaining core characteristics. These divine figures often retain associations with specific celestial bodies, indicating that astronomical knowledge was integrated into religious frameworks and transmitted along with theological concepts. Gothic cathedrals built during the 12th and 13th centuries demonstrate engineering capabilities that seem to appear suddenly without clear developmental stages, incorporating proportional systems based on sacred geometry that create specific acoustic and energetic effects within the buildings. The precision of these structures' proportional systems and their sophisticated integration of astronomical alignments suggest that medieval cathedral builders had access to ancient architectural knowledge preserved through initiatic traditions. The Gothic architectural revolution transformed European building practices within a remarkably brief period, introducing engineering techniques and design principles that exceeded contemporary theoretical understanding of structural mechanics. The transition from Romanesque to Gothic architecture occurred primarily between 1140 and 1200 AD, a span of only 60 years during which builders developed and implemented revolutionary construction methods, including pointed arches, ribbed vaulting, flying buttresses, and massive stained glass windows. This rapid technological advancement challenges conventional models of gradual innovation through trial and error, suggesting instead that builders accessed preserved knowledge from earlier sources rather than developing these techniques through contemporary experimentation. The proportional systems used in Gothic cathedral design incorporate mathematical relationships based on the golden ratio, harmonic proportions derived from musical intervals, and geometric constructions that create specific spatial and acoustic effects. Analysis of cathedral floor plans reveals consistent use of geometric patterns, including overlapping circles, equilateral triangles, and proportional rectangles that determine the placement of columns, the dimensions of bays, and the heights of vaults. These geometric systems appear fully developed in the earliest Gothic structures without evidence of preliminary experimentation or gradual refinement. The acoustic properties of Gothic cathedrals demonstrate sophisticated understanding of sound propagation, resonance phenomena, and the relationship between architectural form and acoustic experience. The buildings create reverberation times that enhance liturgical music while maintaining speech intelligibility, a balance that requires precise control of room volumes, surface materials, and geometric proportions. Modern acoustic analysis reveals that cathedral designs incorporate features that optimize sound distribution and create specific resonance frequencies that match the harmonic structures of Gregorian chant and early polyphonic music. The engineering solutions employed in Gothic construction include structural innovations that anticipated principles of force distribution and load path optimization that would not be formally recognized until the development of modern structural analysis. Flying buttresses channel lateral thrust from high vaults to external supports through precisely calculated angles and proportions, enabling construction of unprecedented interior volumes with minimal internal obstructions. The mathematical sophistication required for designing these structural systems exceeds the documented knowledge available to medieval builders through contemporary sources. The astronomical alignments incorporated into Gothic cathedrals demonstrate detailed knowledge of solar movements, stellar positions, and calendar systems. Many cathedrals include features designed to mark specific solar events, including solstices, equinoxes, and feast days through the precise placement of windows, apertures, and floor markers that receive sunlight at calculated times. Chartres Cathedral contains a labyrinth whose geometry encodes lunar cycles and whose diameter relates to the cathedral's other dimensions through proportions based on cosmic constants. The preservation of architectural knowledge through medieval mason guilds created institutional structures that maintained technical information across generations, while restricting access to qualified initiates. These guild systems required apprentices to undergo years of training in geometric construction, proportional systems, and symbolic interpretation before receiving full master status. The initiation ceremonies and oath-taking procedures suggest these organizations functioned as mystery schools, preserving ancient knowledge under the guise of professional trade associations. The symbolic content carved into Gothic cathedrals includes geometric patterns, astronomical diagrams, and mathematical representations that encode technical information within decorative programs. The rose windows at major cathedrals incorporate geometric divisions based on sacred numbers and proportional relationships that match those found in ancient temple designs from Egypt and Mesopotamia. These symbolic parallels suggest that medieval builders had access to knowledge about ancient sacred architecture and deliberately incorporated these principles into Christian structures. The Piri Reis map, compiled in 1513 by Ottoman Admiral Piri Reis, shows the coastlines of South America and Antarctica with accuracy that would not be achieved by European cartographers until the 18th and 19th centuries. The map includes details of the Antarctic coastline beneath the ice sheet, geographical features that were not officially discovered until seismic surveys in the 20th century revealed the bedrock topography, the map. Currently housed in the Topkapi Palace Museum in Istanbul, was discovered in 1929 during renovations and has generated intense scholarly debate about the sources used in its compilation. Piri Reis included notes on the map indicating he compiled it from approximately 20 source maps, including charts used by Christopher Columbus and maps dating to the time of Alexander the Great. The inclusion of Antarctic coastline details presents a profound mystery, because Antarctica was not officially discovered until 1820, and the ice sheet covering the continent has existed for millions of years, making observation of the bedrock coastline impossible without modern ice-penetrating technology. The accuracy of the coastal outlines when compared to modern seismic surveys suggests the source maps were compiled during a period when Antarctica was either ice-free or before the current ice sheet reached its present extent. The South American coastline depicted on the Piri Reis map demonstrates remarkable accuracy in showing the positions of rivers, bays, and coastal features that would not be thoroughly mapped by European explorers until decades after 1513. The map includes the mouths of major river systems, including the Amazon and Rio de la Plata, positioned with geographic precision that matches modern cartographic data. This accuracy suggests the source maps were based on actual exploration and systematic surveying rather than speculation or artistic interpretation. The mathematical projection used for the Piri Reis map indicates advanced cartographic knowledge, including understanding of how to transfer spherical surfaces onto flat planes while maintaining accurate distance and directional relationships. The map appears to use a projection centered on Cairo, suggesting the source materials originated from the Mediterranean region or Near East. The sophistication of the projection methods and the accuracy of geographic positions indicate that the original compilers possessed astronomical observation capabilities and mathematical techniques for converting celestial observations into geographic coordinates. Additional historical maps demonstrate similar anomalies, suggesting preservation of ancient geographic knowledge through medieval sources. The Orontes Phineas map of 1531 depicts Antarctica as a separate continent with detailed interior features, including mountain ranges and river systems that match subglacial topography revealed by modern surveys. The Boacha map of 1754 shows Antarctica divided by a waterway corresponding to subglacial channels discovered by 20th century research. These consistent representations across different time periods suggest the maps were based on common ancient sources, rather than contemporary exploration. The Mercator map of 1569 incorporates geographic information about Arctic regions that would not be verified until modern exploration, including the correct relative positions of Greenland, Iceland, and northern continental land masses. The accuracy of high-latitude features suggests the source materials included observations from periods when ice cover was less extensive than in modern times, enabling direct observation and mapping of northern coastlines that are currently icebound. The Zeno map of 1380 describes voyages to Greenland and possibly North America that predate Columbus, including descriptions of settlements and geographic features that match archaeological discoveries of Norse exploration sites. The map includes details about Greenland's geography that suggest knowledge of the island during warmer climatic periods, when coastal areas were more accessible than in subsequent centuries. The accuracy of geographic positions and the descriptions of settlements provide evidence for extensive pre-Columbian exploration and mapping of North Atlantic regions. The existence of accurate ancient maps requires explanation through either advanced prehistoric civilizations that conducted systematic global exploration and surveying, or through gradual accumulation of knowledge by maritime cultures over thousands of years with systematic preservation and updating of geographic information. Either explanation challenges conventional historical models that assumed geographic knowledge developed linearly through recorded European exploration beginning in the 15th century. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in 1901 in a Roman shipwreck off the Greek island of Antikythera, consists of at least 37 bronze gears arranged in a complex mechanical computer capable of calculating astronomical positions and predicting eclipses decades into the future. X-ray tomography and CT scanning have revealed the mechanism's internal structure, exposing gear trains with tooth counts that correspond precisely to astronomical cycles, including the Saros cycle of 223 lunar months used for eclipse prediction. The device, dating to approximately 100 BC, represents a level of mechanical sophistication and astronomical knowledge that was not matched by European technology until the development of mechanical clocks in the 14th century AD, creating a gap of over 1400 years in documented technological capabilities. The mechanism was discovered by Greek sponge divers exploring a shipwreck at a depth of 45 meters off Point Glyphadia on the island of Antikythera. The ship, dated to approximately 70 to 60 BC based on pottery and other artifacts, was carrying luxury goods including bronze and marble statues, glassware, and fine pottery when it sank. The corroded bronze mechanism was initially dismissed as unimportant, until examination revealed gear wheels and inscribed plates suggesting it was a sophisticated mechanical device rather than a simple decorative object. Early investigations by archaeologist Valerios Stais and physicist John Svoronos during the early 20th century identified the object as an astronomical calculator. But the full complexity of the mechanism was not understood until X-ray examination by physicist Derek de Solla Price during the 1950s and 60s. Price's analysis revealed that the device contained multiple gear trains that calculated lunar phases, solar position, and eclipse timing through mechanical analog computation. His work demonstrated that ancient Greek craftsmen possessed understanding of differential gearing and precision mechanics that far exceeded previous estimates of ancient technological capabilities. Advanced imaging using X-ray computed tomography, conducted by researchers Michael Wright and Tony Freeth during the early 21st century, revealed previously unknown features including additional gear wheels, inscribed calendars, and calculation scales. These studies documented at least 37 gear wheels, though the original complete device may have contained more components that are now lost. The gears show sophisticated design features including triangular teeth profiles that ensure smooth operation and variable tooth spacing that accommodates astronomical irregularities. The primary gear train in the mechanism calculates solar and lunar positions using a 4-year gear cycle that incorporates the Kallipic calendar correction for accumulated errors in the standard Greek lunar calendar. The system includes a differential gear mechanism that subtracts solar motion from lunar motion to calculate the moon's phase, a mechanical computation that demonstrates advanced understanding of planetary mechanics and sophisticated engineering design. The use of differential gearing in the Antikythera mechanism predates the next known application of this technology by over 1,000 years. The eclipse prediction function of the mechanism employs the Saros cycle, an 18-year 11-day period after which eclipse patterns repeat due to the mathematical relationship between lunar months and the moon's orbital nodes. The device includes a spiral dial divided into 223 sections representing lunar months, with inscriptions indicating eclipse possibilities and characteristics. The accuracy of eclipse predictions generated by the mechanism matches calculations performed using modern astronomical software, demonstrating that ancient astronomers possessed precise knowledge of lunar orbital parameters. Additional functions identified in the mechanism include calculation of the Metonic cycle, a 19-year period that synchronizes solar and lunar calendars, and tracking of planetary positions, though the latter capability remains incompletely understood due to the fragmentary state of the surviving mechanism. Inscriptions on the device include a parapegma, an ancient astronomical calendar listing the rising and setting times of major stars throughout the year, and instructions for operating the mechanism and interpreting its output displays. The mechanical precision required for constructing the Antikythera mechanism indicates access to advanced metalworking tools and techniques, including precision lathes for cutting gear teeth, measurement instruments capable of dividing circles into hundreds of equal parts, and quality control methods for ensuring proper gear meshing and smooth operation. The bronze alloys used in the gears show composition ratios optimized for strength and corrosion resistance, suggesting systematic metallurgical knowledge. The device's construction required collaboration between astronomers who understood celestial mechanics, mathematicians who could design the necessary gear ratios, and craftsmen who possessed the technical skills to manufacture precision components. The existence of the Antikythera mechanism raises profound questions about the extent of ancient technological capabilities and the potential loss of advanced knowledge during periods of cultural disruption. The device represents the only surviving example of its kind from the ancient world. Yet the sophistication of its design suggests it was not a unique experimental prototype, but rather represented an established tradition of astronomical instrument making. References in ancient texts to devices made by Archimedes and other Greek mechanicians suggest that sophisticated mechanical computers may have been more common than the archaeological record indicates, with most examples lost to corrosion, recycling of valuable bronze, or destruction during historical upheavals. Recent genetic studies of ancient populations have revealed patterns of migration and cultural contact that support textual evidence for knowledge transmission between ancient civilizations. DNA analysis of remains from early Mesopotamian, Egyptian, and Indus Valley sites shows genetic markers indicating sustained contact between these populations despite vast distances separating their territories, with these patterns corresponding to periods when advanced technological knowledge appears simultaneously in multiple regions. Paleogenetic research conducted by international teams using advanced DNA sequencing technologies has revolutionized understanding of ancient population movements and revealed connections that textual and archaeological evidence had only suggested. Analysis of mitochondrial DNA from skeletal remains at Ur, dating to the early 3rd millennium BC, reveals genetic signatures, indicating admixture from populations originating in the Indus Valley region, over 2,000 kilometers to the east. These genetic markers appear in the elite burial contexts associated with individuals who possessed advanced technical knowledge based on grave goods, including astronomical instruments, mathematical tablets, and sophisticated metallurgical tools. The correlation between genetic ancestry and technical expertise suggests that knowledge transmission occurred through movement of specialized craftsmen and scholars, rather than through abstract diffusion of ideas. Y chromosome analysis of male lineages from early dynastic Egypt demonstrates genetic connections to populations from Mesopotamia and the Levant during the pre-dynastic and early dynastic periods. The appearance of these foreign genetic markers corresponds chronologically with the sudden emergence of advanced architectural techniques, hieroglyphic writing, and sophisticated administrative systems in Egypt around 3100 BC. The genetic evidence supports models proposing that Egyptian civilization benefited from knowledge and expertise brought by immigrants or visitors from the already developed civilizations of Mesopotamia. Ancient DNA recovered from Harappan civilization sites in the Indus Valley reveals population structure indicating extensive trade networks and cultural exchanges with Mesopotamian regions during the 3rd millennium BC. Genetic markers found in Indus Valley populations show similarities to those found in contemporary Mesopotamian samples, suggesting either direct migration of individuals between these regions or sustained genetic exchange through long-distance trade networks. The distribution of these genetic markers across different social strata at Indus Valley sites indicates that contact was not limited to elite merchant classes, but involved broader population movements. The genetic evidence for population movements coincides with archaeological evidence of technological transfers between civilizations. The appearance of Mesopotamian-style cylinder seals in Indus Valley context occurs during the same period when genetic markers indicate increased contact between these regions. Similarly, the introduction of specific metallurgical techniques and agricultural practices can be correlated with periods of enhanced genetic exchange documented in paleogenetic data. These correlations suggest that technological knowledge was transmitted through personal contact and direct instruction, rather than through independent invention or abstract diffusion. Whole genome sequencing of ancient individuals from key archaeological sites has revealed that certain populations possessed enhanced cognitive capabilities and physical characteristics that distinguish them from contemporary hunter-gatherer populations. Analysis of genes associated with brain development, immune function, and metabolic efficiency shows that agricultural populations underwent rapid genetic changes during the Neolithic period that would have affected cognitive processing, disease resistance, and nutritional adaptation. These genetic changes occurred too rapidly to be explained by natural selection alone, suggesting strong selective pressures or possibly deliberate intervention in breeding patterns. The distribution of specific genetic variants associated with lactase persistence, allowing adults to digest milk, shows patterns of rapid spread across Eurasia during the period of early civilization development. This genetic adaptation appears in populations that adopted dairying and pastoral practices, demonstrating how cultural innovations created selective pressures that drove genetic evolution. The speed of this genetic change and its correlation with specific cultural practices illustrates the complex interaction between technological advancement and biological adaptation in human populations. Genetic analysis of ancient elite populations from Mesopotamia and Egypt reveals characteristics that distinguish them from general populations, including greater genetic diversity, suggesting mixed ancestry from multiple regions, higher frequencies of certain cognitive associated genetic variants, and evidence of consanguineous marriage practices designed to preserve specific genetic lineages. These patterns support textual evidence describing hereditary priesthoods and royal dynasties that maintain genetic continuity across many generations, while also incorporating selected individuals from diverse backgrounds. The genetic signature of population bottlenecks appears in human DNA at periods corresponding to major catastrophic events described in ancient flood narratives. Analysis of global human genetic diversity reveals evidence of severe population reductions occurring approximately 12,000 to 10,000 years ago, coinciding with the Younger Dryas climate event and the catastrophic flooding that accompanied rapid ice sheet melting. These genetic bottlenecks reduced human genetic diversity and created founder effects that shape the genetic structure of subsequent populations. The transition from Babylonian mystery schools to Alexandrian institutions occurred during the Hellenistic period, when Greek scholars gained access to Mesopotamian temple libraries following Alexander's conquest of the Persian Empire. The Library of Alexandria became the primary repository for translated Mesopotamian texts, with scholars like Apollodorus of Athens working to render cuneiform technical treatises into Greek, preserving not only theoretical content, but also practical instructions for implementing advanced technologies. The establishment of Alexandria as a centre of learning under the Ptolemaic dynasty created unprecedented opportunities for synthesizing knowledge from Egyptian, Mesopotamian, Greek, and other ancient traditions into comprehensive scholarly collections. The library at Alexandria, founded by Ptolemy I Soter around 300 BC and expanded significantly under Ptolemy II Philadelphus, accumulated an estimated 400,000 to 700,000 scrolls containing text from throughout the ancient world. The collection included not only literary and philosophical works, but also extensive technical documentation covering mathematics, astronomy, medicine, engineering, and other practical sciences. acquisition efforts specifically targeted Mesopotamian cuneiform archives, Egyptian temple libraries, and Greek philosophical schools, creating the most comprehensive repository of ancient knowledge ever assembled. Translation projects at Alexandria involved teams of scholars fluent in multiple ancient languages who worked systematically to render important texts into Greek, the lingua franca of the Hellenistic world. The translation of Mesopotamian astronomical tablets required not only linguistic expertise, but also mathematical knowledge sufficient to understand complex calculations and technical terminology. Scholars like Berossus, who had trained in Babylonian temple schools before relocating to the Greek world, served as crucial intermediaries who possessed both the linguistic skills and technical understanding necessary for accurate translation of scientific texts. The astronomical knowledge preserved at Alexandria through translated Babylonian sources enabled Greek astronomers to achieve unprecedented precision in celestial calculations. Hipparchus, working at Alexandria during the 2nd century BC, used Babylonian observational records spanning several centuries to discover the precession of the equinoxes, calculating the rate of precessional motion with remarkable accuracy. His work demonstrated how the accumulation and preservation of long-term observational data enabled discoveries that would be impossible through short-term observations alone. Mathematical texts translated from Babylonian sources introduced Greek scholars to sophisticated computational techniques including sexagesimal notation, algebraic problem-solving methods, and geometric constructions that exceeded contemporary Greek mathematical knowledge. The synthesis of Babylonian computational methods with Greek geometric proofs created new mathematical approaches that combined the strengths of both traditions. Euclidean geometry, as codified in the Elements, drew upon both Greek philosophical approaches to mathematical proof and practical problem-solving techniques derived from Babylonian and Egyptian sources. Medical knowledge preserved at Alexandria synthesized Egyptian pharmacological traditions, Mesopotamian diagnostic procedures, and Greek anatomical understanding into comprehensive medical systems. The translations of Egyptian medical papyri and Mesopotamian diagnostic handbooks provided Greek physicians with extensive catalogues of diseases, symptoms, treatments, and prognoses accumulated over thousands of years of medical practice. This preserved medical knowledge formed the foundation for the systematic medical traditions developed by Hellenistic physicians, including Herophilus and Erasistratus, who conducted anatomical research at Alexandria. Engineering texts translated at Alexandria preserved Mesopotamian and Egyptian knowledge of hydraulic systems, architectural principles, and mechanical devices. These technical documents included detailed specifications for irrigation systems, construction procedures for monumental architecture, and designs for mechanical tools and instruments. The preservation of this engineering knowledge enabled later technological developments, including the sophisticated mechanical devices designed by Alexandrian inventors like Ctesibius and Hero, who created pneumatic organs, automated theatres, and other complex mechanisms. The destruction of the Library of Alexandria through multiple fires and conflicts during the Roman period resulted in catastrophic loss of ancient knowledge. The first major damage occurred during Julius Caesar's Alexandrian campaign in 48 BC, when fires spread from burning ships to warehouse districts containing portions of the library collection. Subsequent damage occurred during the reign of Aurelian in the 3rd century AD, and possibly during the rise of Christianity, when pagan temples and their associated libraries were destroyed. The final destruction of remaining collections occurred during the Islamic conquest of Egypt in the 7th century AD, when the last remnants of the Great Library were dispersed or destroyed. Despite the library's destruction, significant portions of the preserved knowledge survived through copies distributed to other libraries throughout the Hellenistic world, through scholars who had studied at Alexandria and carried knowledge to other centres of learning, and through later compilations that drew upon Alexandrian sources. The survival of works by Euclid, Ptolemy, Galen, and other Alexandrian scholars demonstrates that systematic copying and distribution of important texts enabled partial preservation of the library's contents even after the physical destruction of the central collection. The Hermetic texts that emerge from Alexandria during the Roman period demonstrate direct continuity with Mesopotamian traditions regarding divine beings and their technological capabilities. The Corpus Hermeticum describes beings called daemons who possess knowledge of natural forces and the ability to manipulate matter according to divine principles, entities that correspond precisely to the Mesopotamian Apkallu in their attributed capabilities and role as intermediaries between celestial and terrestrial domains. The Hermetic tradition preserved elements of ancient Egyptian, Mesopotamian, and Greek wisdom teachings, while adapting them to the philosophical and religious contexts of the early centuries AD. The Corpus Hermeticum, composed primarily during the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD but claiming to preserve much older Egyptian wisdom, consists of approximately 17 or 18 tractates addressing topics including cosmology, theology, alchemy, astrology, and theurgy. The texts present dialogues between Hermes Trismegistus, identified with the Egyptian god Thoth, and the Greek Hermes, and various disciples including Asclepius, Tat, and Ammon. The dialogues reveal sophisticated knowledge of astronomical cycles, mathematical principles, and natural philosophy that the texts attribute to divine revelation from primordial times. The Hermetic texts describe a hierarchical cosmos populated by various classes of spiritual beings, including planetary archons, celestial daemons, and terrestrial spirits who govern different aspects of physical reality. These beings are portrayed as possessing comprehensive knowledge of natural laws and the ability to manipulate physical forces through understanding of hidden principles and divine names. The descriptions of these entities' capabilities closely parallel Mesopotamian accounts of the Apkallu and other divine beings who taught humanity the arts of civilization. The alchemical component of Hermetic tradition preserves practical knowledge of metallurgy, chemistry, and material transformation disguised within symbolic and spiritual frameworks. Hermetic alchemical texts describe specific procedures for refining metals, creating alloys, and producing chemical compounds using terminology that blends technical instructions with mystical symbolism. Analysis of these texts by historians of science reveals that beneath the obscure language lie genuine chemical procedures and metallurgical techniques that were effective for producing desired transformations. The astrological knowledge preserved in Hermetic texts demonstrates sophisticated understanding of planetary movements, stellar positions, and the calculation of astrological charts. Hermetic astrology synthesized Babylonian astronomical precision with Egyptian calendar systems and Greek philosophical interpretations of cosmic influence, creating comprehensive systems for calculating planetary positions and interpreting their supposed effects on terrestrial events. The mathematical accuracy of Hermetic astrological calculations confirms that practitioners possess genuine astronomical knowledge, regardless of the validity of astrological interpretations. The transmission of Hermetic knowledge occurred through networks of initiated practitioners who studied under qualified teachers and underwent structured training programs. Hermetic schools operated in Alexandria, Rome, and other major cities of the late Roman Empire, maintaining libraries of texts and teaching curricula that preserved ancient knowledge. The initiation ceremonies and oath-taking procedures described in Hermetic texts indicate these schools functioned as mystery religions that restricted advanced knowledge to qualified students who demonstrated proper preparation and commitment. The preservation of Hermetic texts through the medieval period occurred primarily through Islamic scholarship, after most Greek originals were lost during the decline of the Western Roman Empire. Arabic translations of Hermetic works circulated throughout the Islamic world, where they influenced the development of Islamic alchemy, astronomy, and natural philosophy. The texts were subsequently translated from Arabic into Latin during the 12th and 13th centuries, making Hermetic knowledge available to medieval European scholars who incorporated these teachings into emerging scientific and philosophical traditions. The influence of Hermetic thought on Renaissance scholars including Marsilio Ficino, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, and Giordano Bruno shaped the development of early modern science through its emphasis on discovering hidden laws governing natural phenomena. The Hermetic principle that true knowledge comes through understanding underlying principles rather than merely observing surface appearances encouraged systematic investigation of natural processes and mathematical description of physical laws. This philosophical approach contributed to the scientific revolution even as the specific cosmological and theological claims of Hermeticism were rejected by later scientists. Contemporary archaeological discoveries continue to reveal connections between ancient Near Eastern civilizations and their shared mythological frameworks, providing physical evidence for the transmission of knowledge systems across cultural boundaries. Recent excavations at Göbekli Tepe have uncovered megalithic structures that demonstrate construction techniques and astronomical alignments paralleling those found in later Mesopotamian and Egyptian sites, suggesting cultural transmission spanning thousands of years. The ongoing discoveries at this site and others throughout the ancient world continue to challenge conventional chronologies and force reconsideration of humanity's technological and cultural capabilities during prehistoric periods. The excavations at Göbekli Tepe, which have been ongoing since Klaus Schmidt's initial work in the 1990s and continue under the direction of subsequent research teams, have revealed only a small fraction of the site's total extent. Ground-penetrating radar surveys indicate that more than 20 additional circular enclosures remain unexcavated, suggesting that the full scope of the complex may be several times larger than currently known. Each new season of excavation reveals additional details about the site's construction, use, and eventual burial that refine understanding of this unprecedented prehistoric monument. Recent discoveries at other sites throughout Turkey, Syria, and the Levant reveal that Göbekli Tepe was not an isolated phenomenon, but rather represented one major centre within a broader cultural complex that produced megalithic architecture and sophisticated artistic traditions during the 10th and 9th millennia BC. Sites including Karahan Tepe, Habet Suvan Tepe, and Sefer Tepe contain similar T-shaped pillars and circular enclosures, though generally on smaller scales than Göbekli Tepe. The distribution of these related sites suggests a widespread cultural tradition that spanned hundreds of kilometres and persisted for millennia. Underwater archaeological surveys using advanced sonar and submersible technologies continue to discover submerged structures at coastal locations worldwide that demonstrate sophisticated construction techniques and urban planning from periods when these areas were above sea level. Recent discoveries off the coasts of India, Japan, Cuba, and the Mediterranean add to the growing catalogue of underwater sites that challenge conventional understanding of prehistoric maritime capabilities and coastal settlement patterns. These discoveries demonstrate that rising sea levels following the last ice age inundated vast areas that once supported human populations and potentially advanced civilizations. The application of LiDAR technology to archaeological surveying has revealed extensive urban complexes hidden beneath jungle canopy in Central America, Southeast Asia, and other heavily vegetated regions. LiDAR surveys of the Maya lowlands have documented cities covering thousands of square kilometres, with populations far exceeding previous estimates, connected by extensive road networks, and supported by sophisticated agricultural systems. These discoveries demonstrate that remote sensing technologies can detect archaeological features that remain invisible to traditional ground-based survey methods, suggesting that many significant sites remain undiscovered. Genetic analysis of ancient populations continues to reveal unexpected patterns of migration, admixture, and cultural contact that reshape understanding of prehistoric population movements and cultural exchanges. Recent studies have identified genetic evidence of transoceanic contacts during prehistoric periods, population replacements that coincide with major cultural transitions, and maintenance of distinct genetic lineages over thousands of years within specialized occupational groups. These genetic discoveries provide independent confirmation of cultural contacts and population movements that textual and archaeological evidence had suggested but could not definitively prove. The convergence of archaeological evidence, textual analysis, astronomical knowledge, and cross-cultural correlations points toward a fundamentally different understanding of human prehistory than conventional archaeology acknowledges. The systematic preservation of advanced knowledge through mystery schools, secret societies, and hereditary priesthoods indicates that sophisticated technological and scientific understanding survived multiple catastrophic events and was deliberately transmitted across millennia through carefully structured institutional frameworks. The evidence examined throughout this investigation demonstrates that human civilizational development has not followed a simple linear progression from primitive to sophisticated, but rather has involved cycles of advancement, catastrophic collapse, knowledge preservation, and gradual reconstruction. The consistency of flood narratives across more than 500 cultures worldwide, combined with geological evidence of catastrophic climate change during the Younger Dryas period, supports the interpretation that global catastrophes have repeatedly reset human civilizational development. The preservation of detailed technical knowledge about astronomical cycles, mathematical principles, and engineering techniques through these catastrophic periods indicates that some groups successfully maintained advanced understanding and systematically transmitted it to subsequent generations. The mystery schools, temple priesthoods, and craft guilds that emerged in early historical civilizations functioned as knowledge preservation institutions designed to protect essential information from loss during periods of social disruption. The astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient monuments, preserved in cuneiform texts, and transmitted through Hermetic traditions demonstrates that prehistoric peoples possessed sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, including the precessional cycle, planetary movements, and eclipse prediction. The mathematical precision required for calculating these phenomena and encoding them in architectural features indicates access to observational data spanning many centuries and computational techniques comparable to modern astronomical methods. This level of astronomical sophistication cannot be adequately explained through gradual development by isolated primitive societies, but rather suggests inheritance of knowledge from earlier advanced civilizations. The architectural achievements demonstrated at sites like Göbekli Tepe, the Great Pyramid, and submerged coastal cities reveal construction capabilities that exceed conventional explanations based on primitive tools and manual labor. The precision stone cutting, massive stone transportation, complex geometric layouts, and sophisticated engineering solutions employed at these sites indicate that their builders possessed advanced technical knowledge and organizational capabilities. The consistency of certain architectural principles across different cultures and time periods suggests transmission of standardized building knowledge through professional networks of initiates. The metallurgical sophistication demonstrated in prehistoric contexts, including advanced alloying, electrochemical techniques, and precision manufacturing, indicates that ancient peoples possessed detailed understanding of material properties and chemical processes. The appearance of these advanced techniques in early periods without clear developmental predecessors suggests that metallurgical knowledge was transmitted from earlier sources rather than developed gradually through experimentation. The preservation of metallurgical knowledge through craft guilds and alchemical traditions enabled its survival and transmission across millennia. The linguistic evidence for shared technical terminology, cosmological concepts, and religious frameworks across geographically separated ancient civilizations indicates extensive cultural contact and knowledge exchange during prehistoric periods. The distribution of related words for astronomical concepts, mathematical operations, and architectural features suggests that specialized knowledge was transmitted through networks of scholars and craftsmen who maintained contact across vast distances. The preservation of this specialized vocabulary through religious and mystical traditions enabled its survival when practical applications were forgotten. The genetic evidence for population movements and admixture during key periods of technological advancement supports models proposing that knowledge transmission occurred through migration of specialized individuals who carried technical expertise to new regions. The correlation between genetic markers and the appearance of advanced technologies suggests that cultural diffusion involved actual movement of knowledgeable individuals rather than abstract transmission of ideas. The maintenance of distinct genetic lineages within hereditary priesthoods and craft guilds demonstrates that knowledge preservation involved biological as well as cultural continuity. The implications of this evidence for understanding human origins, capabilities and potential are profound and far-reaching. The recognition that advanced knowledge has been repeatedly developed, lost, and rediscovered throughout human history suggests that modern civilization represents not the first flowering of human intellectual achievement, but rather the latest in a series of civilizational cycles. The preservation of ancient knowledge through institutional frameworks designed to survive catastrophic disruptions provides models for ensuring that current scientific and technological understanding could survive future catastrophes that may threaten contemporary civilization. The systematic study of ancient knowledge preservation methods offers insights into how essential information can be encoded in durable formats, transmitted through institutional structures, and protected from loss during periods of social collapse. The combination of written texts, architectural encoding, symbolic systems, and oral traditions employed by ancient mystery schools created redundant preservation mechanisms that ensured survival of critical knowledge even when individual preservation methods failed. The application of similar multi-layered preservation strategies to current scientific knowledge could help ensure its survival for future generations. The recognition that prehistoric peoples possessed sophisticated astronomical, mathematical, and engineering knowledge challenges assumptions about the intellectual capabilities of ancient humans and suggests that cognitive potential has remained essentially constant throughout human history, while the preservation and accumulation of knowledge has varied dramatically. The loss of advanced knowledge during catastrophic periods demonstrates that civilizational achievement depends not only on individual intelligence, but also on institutional structures that preserve and transmit accumulated understanding across generations. The development of robust knowledge preservation systems becomes crucial for ensuring continued progress and preventing regression during periods of crisis. The evidence presented throughout this investigation points to a profound truth that challenges conventional understanding of human history and development. We are not the first advanced civilization to emerge on Earth, but rather inherit a legacy of knowledge accumulated across multiple cycles of civilizational rise, catastrophic collapse, and painstaking reconstruction. The Sumerian tablets describing the world before the flood, the astronomical precision encoded in prehistoric monuments, the sophisticated metallurgy found in Neolithic contexts, and the global distribution of identical flood narratives all point toward the same conclusion. Human civilization possesses far greater antiquity and has achieved far higher levels of sophistication than conventional archaeology acknowledges. The systematic preservation of advanced knowledge through mystery schools, temple priesthoods, and hereditary craft guilds demonstrates that ancient peoples understood the fragility of civilization and took deliberate measures to ensure that essential information would survive catastrophic disruptions. The encoding of astronomical data in architectural proportions, the translation and copying of ancient texts across multiple languages and media, and the establishment of initiation-based educational systems all functioned as redundant preservation mechanisms designed to protect humanity's accumulated understanding from loss during dark ages that followed each civilizational collapse. The cyclical pattern of development, catastrophe, and renewal appears consistently throughout the evidence examined in this investigation. The Younger Dryas impact event approximately 12,900 years ago destroyed what appears to have been a globally connected civilization possessing advanced astronomical knowledge and sophisticated engineering capabilities. The survivors of this catastrophe preserved fragments of their knowledge through the disaster period and gradually re-established civilizational structures, leading to the sudden emergence of advanced urban centers in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley around 3000 BC. These early historical civilizations did not develop their sophisticated capabilities through gradual evolution from hunter-gatherer societies, but rather inherited core knowledge from the antediluvian world. The recognition that we stand within a continuing cycle of civilizational development carries urgent implications for contemporary humanity. The same patterns of environmental degradation, resource depletion, social fragmentation, and technological hubris that ancient texts describe as preceding previous catastrophes appear increasingly evident in our current global situation. The ancient warnings preserved through mythological narratives and prophetic traditions may represent not primitive superstition, but rather hard-won wisdom about the conditions that lead to civilizational collapse and the measures necessary to prevent or survive such catastrophes. The preservation methods employed by ancient mystery schools offer practical guidance for ensuring that current scientific and technological knowledge could survive potential future disruptions. The combination of multiple preservation formats including written records, architectural encoding, symbolic systems, and trained human repositories created resilient knowledge preservation networks that maintained essential information across millennia. The application of similar multi-layered approaches to preserving contemporary scientific understanding, combined with the development of institutional structures designed to maintain knowledge through periods of social collapse, could help ensure that future generations would not need to rebuild human understanding from primitive foundations. As we stand at the threshold of capabilities that could either elevate humanity to unprecedented heights or precipitate another civilizational collapse, the lessons preserved through thousands of years of cyclical development become crucial for our survival and continued evolution. The choice before us mirrors that faced by previous advanced civilizations, whether to learn from the accumulated wisdom of ages past and consciously evolve beyond the destructive patterns that have characterized previous cycles, or to repeat the mistakes that led to catastrophic collapse and condemn future generations to rebuild once again from the fragments of our achievements. The answer to this civilizational question will determine not only our own fate, but the legacy we leave for whatever human societies emerge from the next great turning of the wheel of time.